Hi Emily, it's Mr. Goyette. Just wanted to go over with you real quickly the Unit 6 Assignment 1 for AP US History, Part B. We're going over Part A for Pact Without Power. This is the discussion of the Kellogg-Briand Pact. It says, explain the motivations and attitudes behind the Kellogg-Briand Pact. Why was the treaty an appealing agreement for the United States, France, and other nations? Well, the pact, there was pressure from pacifists, both in Europe and the United States, to pass the Kellogg-Briand Pact. The whole idea of outlawing war after World War I seemed like a good idea. People were in horror after the war and discussed at what had happened during World War I with trench warfare and how devastated Europe was after the war. So it wasn't too hard to convince many that outlawing war was a good idea. Although many, of course, knew that doing this was somewhat impractical. People, we know that warlords or dictators and those rising to power don't often recognize the treaties or agreements of peaceful nations or peaceful groups within those nations. So why was the treaty an appealing agreement with the United States and France? Well, coming out of World War I, rejecting the horrors of World War I, and the whole idea that it was going to somehow work. It also, as good as your text says, included nearly every nation in the world, but the effect was negligible. All promised to renounce war as an instrument of national policy, except, of course, as the British made clear in a reservation, that matters of self-defense. Enforcement of a treaty relied solely on the moral force of world opinion. The Pact of Paris was, as one senator shrewdly commented, only an international kiss. And this brings us to our second question. What treaty did the Kellogg-Briand Pact create? Explain why one senator would call it an international kiss. Well, let's see. It would create the Pact of Paris. And this did not eventually, of course, outlaw. It tried to outlaw war to no avail. And it is an international kiss in that everyone was feeling that they could actually achieve a time of peace. All right, let's look at the other two because we're about halfway through this quick 5-minute review. Cooperation in Latin America. Read Cooperation in Latin America, page 781, and answer the questions 1 or 2 paragraph response. Comment on the allegation in the 1920s and 30s. There was no change in U.S. Latin American policy goals, that is, economic dominance in the Western Hemisphere. Well, in contrast to Theodore Roosevelt's policy, the good neighbor policy was actually a change. Franklin Delano Roosevelt wanted to take his hands off of Latin America a little bit more, ease tensions with Cuba and other Latin American nations, and allow them to conduct their business without American oversight and intervention. In some ways this was good because it showed that the United States was indeed being a good neighbor. In other ways it was allowing the growth of dictators and policies that the United States did not favor. But with World War II coming up, this did not become a hot-button issue for the United States. What's going to lead us to that now is the dictators rising up in Europe. It says read the first 2 paragraphs of War in Europe beginning on page 785 and answer the questions below. Be sure to add specific detail to your answer. To what extent did Americans retreat from the responsibility of foreign affairs and the rise of dictators in the 1930s? Well, look at page 785. We'll notice there that with the Kellogg-Briand Pact and this isolationist stance, the United States was not taking a dominant role. And your textbook makes it clear here that the Kellogg-Briand Pact was symbolic of American foreign policy in the years immediately following World War I. Instead of asserting a role of world leadership, its resources and power commanded, the United States retreated from involvement. Now, many historians viewed this as negative because the United States could have influenced other nations to reject Hitler strongly. However, you got to remember the American people elected their politicians based on a position of isolationism. So I'll allow you to answer the rest of those questions and take your notes. Thank you for tuning in. Talk to you soon.